And hello, everyone. Welcome to week number 4. We are looking at chapter 2, a taxonomy of significant learning. So, this quote starts off the chapter. If learning is regarded not as the acquisition of information, but as a search for meaning and coherence in one's life, and if an emphasis is placed on what is learned and its personal significance to the learner, rather than how much is learned, researchers would gain valuable new insights into both the mechanisms of learning and the relative advantages of teacher controlled and learner controlled modes of learning. So that sounds great. And I think that's what we are striving for is we want to have our students learning what we want them to learn. And in graduate school education, we're trying to inform, educate, and have students achieve a level of mastery of the profession so that way they can go and safely and ethically treat at an entry level. So, what is significant learning? That's something we're striving for. I kind of mentioned what we want for our graduate school students. Is there more to it? Definitely for the undergrad level, that's what Fink's really trying to hone in on. So, this chapter describes a new taxonomy of significant learning. What is significant, what type of learning is significant, may depend upon who the audience is. And does any of this matter to us as current or future educators in a healthcare program? Fink has 5 principles of fine teaching. Good courses are courses that challenge students to significant kinds of learning, use active forms of learning, have teachers who care about the subject, their students, and about teaching and learning, have teachers who interact well with students, and have a good system of feedback, assessment, and grading. Which one does Fink thinks, which one is most important to Fink on that list? According to Fink, number 1, challenge students to significant kinds of learning. So why is that? Well, according to Fink, if students have indeed been challenged to and have achieved something that can meaningfully be called significant learning, then you have been successful. They have been transformed. They have met the course objectives. There are 3 taxonomies. There's a cognitive taxonomy, an affective taxonomy, and a psychomotor taxonomy. So what are these taxonomies? These taxonomies are ways to create course goals and describe how or what the student is going to be learning, how they're going to be transformed in that course. Now, the cognitive taxonomy is the one that's most frequently used in teaching. The cognitive taxonomy you may be familiar with, either directly or indirectly. Oftentimes, we refer to it as Bloom's taxonomy. Listed here on this slide is the highest to lowest kind of progression of learning. So, evaluation is a higher form of learning than synthesis, than analysis, than application, than comprehension, than knowledge. So, this is presented, or this file is available online in this week's learning module, and you can see the different taxonomy, the different components of the taxonomy: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation, and definitions for each. So, as you're thinking about your course, you're going to have course objectives. You may want somebody to remember things previously learned. That's the knowledge category. You may want people to apply that knowledge to actual situations. You may want people to make and defend judgments based on internal evidence or external criteria. So these are different things that will guide and help you to create course objectives. Anderson and Krathwohl kind of revised Bloom's taxonomy, published this in 2001. They renamed knowledge to remember, and they flipped evaluation from the top of the pyramid to the next level down and renamed synthesis to create. So they kind of went from the noun form to more of the verb form. You can kind of see how those are listed there in Bloom's. Bloom's is on the 1956 side of things, and then Anderson and Krathwohl's update for 2001. I think most people still use Bloom's. I use Bloom's for creating my objectives for courses for the University of Medical Sciences Arizona, and I use them for my work with George Fox University. Now, if you haven't already, download Bloom's Taxonomy of Action Verbs, and you can see some different examples. So let's say I wanted you to remember something from this class. I might write an objective. The student, by the end of the term, that's kind of like the lead in, basically what you would write. Describe the 6 components of Bloom's taxonomy. That's remembering. It's just describing, recalling. I may also have you apply Bloom's taxonomy. How would I do that? Apply Bloom's taxonomy by creating objectives for a course. And if we were really diving in deep, maybe I would have you do evaluate or appraise Bloom's taxonomy and compare it with the 2001 updated or revised model. Now, this chapter will highlight a different taxonomy, and so the question is to use Bloom's or not. Bloom's is fairly easy to use. Most people use it. If you go with this other taxonomy, which is perfectly fine, and we're going to do some work using it, it requires you to think about things a little bit differently. And this is Fink's taxonomy. Fink's taxonomy of significant learning. There are 6 components to it that make up this pie shape. There's learning how to learn, foundational knowledge, application, integration, human dimension, and caring. For foundational knowledge, at the base of most other kinds of learning is that need to know something. Knowing is used here. It refers to the student's ability to understand and remember specific information and ideas. It is important for people today to have some valid basic knowledge about things like science, geography, etc., etc. They also need to understand major ideas or perspectives. For example, what evolution is and what it is not, what capitalism is and is not, and so forth. Foundational knowledge provides the basic understanding that is necessary for other kinds of learning. There's the application category. So Fink writes, besides picking up facts and ideas, students often learn how to engage in some new kind of action, which may be intellectual, physical, or social. Learning how to engage in various kinds of thinking is an important form of application learning, but this category of significant learning also includes developing certain skills, such as communication or playing the piano, or learning how to manage complex projects. The special value here is that application learning allows other kinds of learning to become useful. There's integration. When students are able to see and understand the connection between different things, an important kind of learning has occurred. Sometimes they make connections between specific ideas, between various learning experiences, or between different realms of life. The special value here is the act of making new connections give learners a new form of power, especially intellectual power. The human dimension, when students learn something important about themselves or about others, it enables them to function and interact more effectively. They discover the personal and social implications of what they have learned. What they learn or the way in which they learn sometimes gives students a new understanding of themselves, a new vision of what they want to become, or greater confidence that they can do something important. At other times, they acquire a better understanding of others, how and why others act the way they do, or how the learner can interact more effectively with others. Special value, this kind of learning informs students about the human significance of what they are learning. Caring. Sometimes a learning experience changes the degree to which students care about something. This may be reflected in the form of new feelings, interests, or values. Any of these changes means students now care about something to a greater degree than they did before or in a different way. Special value here. When students care about something, they then have the energy they need for learning more about it and making it a part of their lives. Without the energy for learning, nothing significant happens. And learning how to learn in the course of their studies, students can also learn something about the process of learning itself. They may be learning how to be a better student, how to engage in a particular kind of inquiry, or how to become a self-directing learner. All these constitute important forms of learning how to learn. The special value here, this kind of learning enables students to continue learning in the future and to do so with greater effectiveness. And that's something that we really try to get students to do, learn how to become lifelong learners. Now, there's an interactive nature of significant learning. Fink says it's not hierarchical like Bloom's, but it's more relational and even interactive. And in this figure, this illustrates the interactive character of the taxonomy. This more dynamic diagram is intended by Fink to show that each kind of learning is related to other kinds of learning and that achieving any one kind of learning simultaneously enhances the possibility of achieving the other kinds of learning as well. Now, as we talk about this, again, this is a newer model. How evidence-based this is unknown. It makes sense at its face. It has face validity to it. But I guess a good question would be, we would need to go to the educational literature and say, does this model allow for what Fink says it's doing? Now let's talk about formulating goals, course goals, around significant learning. So this is what these taxonomies, like Bloom's taxonomy and Fink's taxonomy, help us to do. So here is an example of some course goals. By the end of the course, students will understand and remember key concepts, terms, relationships, know how to use the content, be able to relate, understand, care about, know how to keep. So there are action verbs. There are things that show what a student will be able to do. Here are some examples of course objectives for a physical therapy course related to applied physiology. demonstrate, describe, explain, compare. So, examples of me using Bloom's taxonomy. Let's talk now about the application of Fink's taxonomy. So, to take a look at foundational knowledge here. Under foundational knowledge, have a mental map of the world and be able to correctly locate major places, countries, mountain ranges, etc. That makes sense of knowledge. That's kind of like a knowing or describing. Same thing, understand major geographic concepts, physical geography, human geography, and so forth. Those make a lot of sense under foundational knowledge. So, where I, using Bloom's taxonomy, kind of just had things by sections, here, Fink is describing things under each of the 6 headings. So I didn't have headings of like knowledge or application, but here Fink does. So application, be able to find information, be able to use. Integration, identify the interactions between geography and other realms of knowledge. Human dimension, be able to identify ways in which one person's life affects and is affected by interactions with other world regions. Caring, be interested in. That makes a lot of sense. Be interested in something. That shows caring. And then learning how to learn, be able to interpret the geographic significance of new information, be familiar with, have some specific ideas. So these are like really good examples here of objectives meeting Fink's taxonomy. Now, how do I know what I need to teach? Because let's say you're given a class and you need to create a course syllabus, you need to have objectives for that course. What's the minimum required information? That gets into what the accrediting bodies expect. And for physical therapy education, that is the Commission on Accreditation in Physical Therapy Education. And they will have documents like shown here on the right, listing the minimum requirements that should be covered throughout the curriculum. And it's a lot of work. You've got to do this when you start a new program, 5 years afterwards, and then from there, every 10 years. You've got to go through and update and be reaccredited. Now, let's take a look at significant learning and the literature on college teaching. One of the attractive features of a taxonomy, as broad as the one that Fink describes, is that it encompasses and integrates a wide range of literature on desirable kinds of learning. Familiar curricular goals come to life when viewed in relation to the taxonomy. In addition, the new taxonomy can organize and make sense of a broad range of published statements on what students can and should learn at the college level. The literature on college teaching contains numerous recommendations about what teachers should be teaching and students should be learning. By looking at these in the framework of significant learning, it becomes easier to see both what is distinctively valuable about each one and that none of them capture the whole of significant learning on its own. So in this table, or excuse me, this exhibit 2.2, it contains a list of several educational goals that have been described in the literature of higher education as desirable for college courses and curricula. These have been sorted into groups according to the kind of significant learning that each seems to best express. So I'm going to let you go ahead and review through these. Read through them, think about them in the context of the bolded category, like learning how to learn, how to be a better student, learning how to engage in self regulated learning or deep learning. So I'll say pause the recording, and then I'll pick up about 5 seconds later. You pause the recording, review through this slide. Go ahead and do that now. And let's continue on looking at the human dimension and some of this information related to what should be expected for college level learning. Go ahead and pause the recording now. Okay, let's pick that back up again with the next slide. Now you can take a look again, what's expected for college learning from these three domains from Fink's taxonomy. Go ahead and pause the recording now. Okay, let's continue on. The next step in understanding the value and meaning of Fink's taxonomy is to relate it even more broadly to the literature on college teaching. Researchers and practitioners have written extensively about what students should learn and about how to teach so that students learn something significant. One of the tests of any taxonomy is how well it interprets and makes sense out of this literature. All right, so this week we have one forum. It's due Saturday by midnight, and then homework is due Sunday by midnight.